let me give you an official welcome to the Certified Practitioners Call. I know that we're really excited to have you on this supermoon May 5th. I don't know about you, but the energy has been really exciting over the last few days. I want to talk about all kinds of things. I'd like to be able to have some time chatting with you and having you share some of your insights and awareness with the different certified practitioners.
Sure.
But there was something that happened this morning I was just telling everybody about before you got on that was really exciting to me, and I wanted you to take a look at that energy kind of almost before we even began, if you didn't mind.
Sure, happily.
As soon as I woke this morning, the kids were just coming in like crazy. And I kind of had a feeling that they were, because the opportunity for you and I to have this conversation and for all of AWECP to put in their insights and awareness is pretty amazing in its own right. But as the kids were coming in, what they showed me was almost two plates. They were very solid, metal almost looking, one above the other. And when I was asking them about that, they were saying that these were two platforms, two very strong platforms, and there was a consciousness in the space in between. They were going to be using that consciousness today to create a bridge of sorts. So it was really interesting to watch it, but it made me even more excited to have these conversations with you today. I'd like to have your insight on that, but they were very much talking about that, utilizing that technology of consciousness that they said was being held today between those two bands. So I know that you have a lot of information about the technology of consciousness, so maybe we can go there as well.
Okay. Here, let me set that one up for you, because let me jump forward to 12-12-12 and 12-21-12. These 9 days are going to be very significant, and they're almost unimaginable, because the frame of reference to understand that shifting transition between one plate and another, as you're describing, is such that what you think on 12-12-12 is what you will get on 12-21-12. So one of the things that is occurring in many reference points at this level is these bridging mechanisms are being reinforced, established, constructed, made available as choices for people to approach that period of time. There's going to be a lot that will happen between now and then, but that's pretty much those two plates that are being created right now. And so that transition is not at 9 days from 12-12. I mean, it is the transition, but that's not when you start to think, oh, well, let me see what I might want in life. In the kids, particularly right now, because they have an edge on conscious awareness over many people on the planet, those vibrational frequencies are being set in motion in ways that they are very both illuminated and magnetic. They are becoming very attractive to the consciousness that each of us holds in the place of uplifting, raising our focus, nurturing, growing. And so that's what they showed you in setting up the conversation for today.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So the technology of consciousness, when I check in with them around this technology of consciousness, it goes hand in hand with what you just said, because on the one hand, it feels very much like there is a structure to this technology of consciousness, and on the other hand, they keep telling me that we can access it, but it almost can't be described at this point, because, like you say, what we will experience in this shift is so far out of the confines of what we've experienced up to this point that we almost don't have a reference point for it. So the conversation in some ways becomes difficult to have, except when it's an experience.
Yes.
So what I'm noticing is we've just started the Level 2 AWECP group, which is very much tapping into this collective consciousness of the children and the technology of consciousness, their message to that level 2 group was just that this will be experienced and then understood versus understood and then experienced.
Yeah, you said that very well, and that is very, very accurate. It's an interesting thing because, for example, this morning, Sandy, Roxanne, and I just had a series of conversations about virtually the same topic. One of the things that is very challenging is the rational mind is being somewhat turned off and redirected, and I say that positively. But what is now beginning to occur more consciously to you, and yet it's still unconscious because it's so fluid. In the conversation we had this morning, I was saying, I made a reference to the moon being brighter and bigger, and all of a sudden this new awareness comes about. And it was just an example in the context of the conversation. And then I turn on the computer and here's this note that says, gee, today is going to be the brightest moon of the whole year. So, but I didn't know that, or I wasn't being conscious to that knowledge as I spoke what I was speaking. And so what you're going to begin to find is this set of reference points that are very fluid, as if you just know something, you do, and you'll speak it, but you won't recognize that you didn't know it from a learned perspective or a book perspective or a listening to the media perspective. It's in these fields of awareness that this knowledge is now, it's like the cloud in the computer system. You're just completely surrounded by this information that is there for you to utilize. And that's a very different feeder system than how we have understood, learned, and come to this point in our kind of book learning, rational mind structure.
It feels to me like this is very much like the children have been learning for quite some time now.
It is where they learn.
Yeah, we're catching up to that.
Yes.
But I watch this same, when I talk to people about, linear learning, especially around children diagnosed with autism versus the cyclical learning that they really engage in. And that cyclical learning almost, it's interesting that you mentioned like the cloud kind of, the iCloud kind of image, because it's very much like this circling of information that is accessible to their field, and in the moment that they need it, they take that in. And in the moment that they don't need it, they're on to something else.
Yes.
And so this whole concept of linear learning is really going out the window in this process.
It's very much as if you had a garage full of athletic equipment, your tennis racket, your golf clubs, your canoe, your hiking equipment. It's all sitting there available to you at the moment that you choose the particular event to go and encounter. It's all there. And that's what's beginning to happen now. You're starting to access that. But there is no logic in how you know this.
Right.
And then it gets to be a little bit challenging, because if I was to tell you that in the very near future the solar system is going to be located in another place in the galaxy, and the stars you look up at and see at nighttime are going to be a very different configuration of stars, you'd look at me like I was goofy. And yet, if you said, well, explain how that's going to happen, I can make an attempt at that, but your eyes are going to glaze over very rapidly. So I'm using an extreme situation that's about to happen, but do you believe me? Well, I want to believe you, or, oh, that's interesting, but there's no foundation to make logical, rational sense of what I just said. And that's what we're running into.
I think that goes hand in hand, too, with this process, both the level 1 and the level 2 process, because when people consciously tap into this, we're always talking about plugging into this technology of consciousness, or plugging into this level of consciousness that the children are bringing with them. I watch this over and over again where people will say, I'm not getting it, I don't get it. Oh, there it is, I got it. And they don't even remember that they didn't get it. They don't remember what it was like in some ways before the getting it. And the other piece of that is this whole concept of moving into this place of trust in the moment, really trusting the fact that we can't explain it, and yet there is access to everything that we need in that moment.
Yes. See, this is the new technology. It's as if a new software program has been installed or turned on and activated, and yet there was no fanfare about it as a big announcement or a pre-definition of it as a learning experience that you then say, oh, okay, we're going to go on the trip, and they've provided me with the map and the video of everything that's going to be there, so I know what I will experience. Mm-hmm. What happens is you are experiencing it, and you just can access it. And that's right. It's so contrary to the rational mind's constructs that are based in fear and safety and need to know. And so you're being freed dramatically from a lot of the restrictions of that third dimensional limitation, and yet there is no linear laying out the plan so I can move forward. Right. And so it's a kind of a contradiction, and yet it's a trust and an application and a belief.
That very much happened when we were laying out level 2, because on the one hand, it had to be so nebulous what's going to come in at each layer, knowing that we're dealing with each of these layers, but what happens in those is really an experience to be had and then an awareness to be articulated after the fact.
Yes.
I'm loving that, because even the process alone, level 1 and level 2, very much that technology of consciousness, every time they're tapping in, accessing that. About a month ago, we went through this phase where it was very much an expansion, where there was an energy of haven't been able to plug in or haven't been able to connect or get that kind of information, then all of a sudden it was there, and on a much bigger scale. And there was no reference point.
Yes.
Could see it clearly for the collective group here, but there was no reference point for what that actually meant. What does it mean to connect into that at a much deeper level, to really be part of it instead of almost just plugging into it? And so that's been a fun one to watch too.
Yes, and you know, I just did something with my group. There's about 230 people or so in this group that's out on the front edge of all the Mastering Alchemy work. They're the ones that every week have a live call, a live interaction with Metatron and whomever. I would say, well, how are you doing? And I'm interested in how you're doing, let me know. So I get a handful of responses when I ask that question, and usually it's the early adopters. It's the ones that are really getting it or having a really good time with it. Mm-hmm. So you get, out of that grouping, you get 30 people who respond. Not even 10%, basically. Mm-hmm. Then I say next week, well, you know, okay, I got some answered questions, but I'm really interested in what you're thinking. So, and then another bunch come. And then in that, though, there's some that say, I don't know, I'm not getting it. You're talking about a shift, and I don't get the shift, and you keep talking about it. And so there's the ones who are frustrated, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. But then I send an email saying, I haven't heard from you. I really want to know. This is the body that's very interesting, because they're basically saying, I don't know what to say. Yeah. I'm happy, my things are working. Yes, my body's hurting. It seems like something's going on. It's nebulous response, and yet it's like, whoa, it's better, it's interesting. Mm-hmm. But what they're saying is, I don't have reference points. I don't know what to say to you when you ask me how I'm doing. I can't define in words what I am now beginning to experience. And I think that's where probably all of the people who are playing with you are, and the kids are saying, this is what you're experiencing. You are in the transition. I get another group that say, well, Jim, you say when you go into the fifth dimension, you're going to be able to think apple. The apple's going to appear in your hand. And yet you've been telling me for months I'm in the fifth dimension, and I'm no apple. So you hear it. So, and I understand but reference points and pause and observation. In fact, you've been given some unbelievable tools, but it's like tools that have never been really explained to you, and there they sit on your tool bench. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's where we are. I see all this cool stuff, What do I do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very interesting.